In a mind-blowing moment in Trump's meeting with Chancellor Merz of Germany, he was asked who he'd like to take over in Iran now that the Ayatollah Khamenei was dead.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in. Pretty soon we're not going to know anybody.
This is how much he's fought through it. He's starting a war with a country of 90 million people is a very big deal. You're taking on a lot of responsibility in that moment. It's like, we killed them all. The people we thought could take over, we killed them all. Whoops. Oh, and then there were another bunch who we thought maybe could take over. Oh, we killed them as well. And there's a small group now who we think could maybe take over, but we'll probably kill them as well. And then we won't know anyone.
Iran has a population of 93 million, I think. It's the world's largest Shia Muslim country. It sits on the world's second largest reserves of gas. It is the fulcrum in a broader Shia community of hundreds of millions of people in Pakistan, Iraq, Lebanon, hundreds of millions of people. And he's just going, we killed them all. And they're dead. There's some more people, maybe they're dead too. Who knows? We're very lucky that they only have 2-term limits, right? Maybe they're going to amend the constitution that this guy does a third term, but I mean, he's pretty old. I mean, by the way, we're not talking about this on the show, but people were talking about cognitive decline with Joe Biden, including us, rightly so, it was happening. I kind of feel like he's losing the plot a little bit, right? I mean, there probably needs to be some kind of intervention at some point. Maybe not now, but I think clearly within 6 months, a year, I mean, he seems to be losing his marbles.
And I mean, of course, if the plan all along was complete regime change, then killing, the leadership and the people below the leadership and the people below them as well, that, I think it would be a mistake, but it could be coherent if that's the plan. However, I mean, in Trump's mind, at least in terms of what he's saying, that's very much not the plan.
Venezuela was so incredible because we did the attack and we kept government totally intact. And we have Delcy, who's been very good. We have the whole chain of command, and they've been, look, the relationship's been great. We've taken out 100 million barrels of oil already, and a big part of that goes to them, and a big part goes to us. And it's been great. We paid for the war many times over, and we're going to be running the oil. And Venezuela is going to make more money than they ever made, and that's great for the people. The relationship has been great. It's been seamless. Nobody's actually ever seen anything like it. If you look at Iraq, where very stupidly everybody was fired, the generals were fired, the military was fired, the police were fired, the fire departments were fired, and all of the government workers were fired. So after, people would call, they had no idea. And by the way, ISIS was formed. That's where ISIS came from. All of the fired people. We don't believe in that.
So, I mean, his analysis of what happened after the Iraq War is not wrong, right? What George W. Bush and the neocons did is they took out, every element of the Iraqi state that was functioning and said, we'll just recreate it from scratch. Now, obviously, what follows an action like that? State failure and civil war, right? So even though Trump seems to be fomenting that, he on one level, he doesn't want that. Like he seems like he wants, like happened in Venezuela, where there was someone from within the regime who took over, Delcy Rodriguez, who was a little bit more cooperative, I suppose, with Donald Trump. That's what he wants. He wants someone who's cooperative from within the regime to take over, so that he can, I suppose, sign a similar deal to that which he had before and declare victory. However, Israel has other ideas. So this morning, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that whoever replaces Khamenei as Iran's supreme leader will be a, quote, unequivocal target for elimination. So, Aaron, in that press conference, you had a sort of coherent idea from Donald Trump of what he wanted. Now, is it a coherent sort of sequence of actions he's taken? Probably not. But from there, he wants something like what happened in Venezuela. He wants someone from within the regime to take over who he considers it's easier to deal with. But Israel is saying, whoever looks like they might be in a position to take over from within the regime, we're going to kill them.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's two different interpretations. Do the Americans and the Israelis have different ambitions for Iran, or are the Israelis being more honest than the Americans?
No, I think the Israelis want a failed state. They want to reconfigure the regional order of West Asia. By the way, there was an article in one of the biggest outlets in Israel talking about precisely this, just overtly talking about it. Hey, maybe the state system in this part of the world is over, except for us. I don't think that Trump and the US are thinking in those terms. However, he is very wrong. The idea that the Islamic Republic is anything like Venezuela, he has no idea what he's talking about. And I'm not saying that because I'm half Iranian. It's nothing like Iraq. Iraq was an autocratic, strong man. You take him out, you take that clan around him out, and then you had obviously that sectarian conflict between Sunni and Shia for a little bit. You have separatism. But the main problem ultimately became a more regional problem of Islamic fundamentalism with ISIS, right? But in terms of the sort of sedimentary leftovers of Saddam Hussein, some of it radicalized, a lot of it just wanted a normal country. The Islamic Republic of Iran is built on blood. When I say that, what do I mean? It is not just built on the historical martyrdom, the political theology of Shiism, the Battle of Karbala. Also between 1980 and 1988, maybe 500,000 Iranians died in that war. So when you've lost that many people, when that many families have sacrificed so much for something, and it is millions of families, and veterans' families in Iran are really looked after, the idea that, oh no, we're just going to give up now, it's not the same thing. There are many people, and again, I'm not talking about the majority of the country. We could be talking about 5 million people, 6 million, doesn't matter, who are deeply ideologically invested for personal reasons as well, for reasons of loss and trauma, who are deeply invested in this regime, in this government. It's not the same thing. Oh, we'll just take out this guy and replace it with this guy. Very, very, very different. And I think actually the Israelis do know that more than Trump and the Americans, and that's why they're actually saying, the whole thing is we need to have a failed state. That's the only way you're going to be able to deal with a government like this. You either negotiate with them rather, and have some kind of settlement. And of course, the Israelis would say, well, we can't have a settlement with them. They want to literally get rid of the state of Israel. There's some truth to that, right? Or you have a failed state and you balkanize and you do Syria meets Yugoslavia. So they're both wrong in different ways, but they do want different things, yes.
The bill on blood, well, this is sort of where I was going to go in our first segment, but then we got sort of into a conversation about how young or not Iran was, because that's what I brought up. But this idea that it's really important in Iran that it was built on blood, that was quite a long time ago. And I was sort of looking at the timelines, and the Iraq-Iran war is about as long ago from now as the Second World War was to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yeah. And you could really imagine someone saying in 1989, look, this is a society where, what was it, 25 million people? I mean, so many people died fighting the Nazis. And the whole identity of that state in many ways was sort of founded on being this sort of anti-fascist resistant state where the whole state was mobilized in this ideological cause. And it can be the case that sort of over time, what is presented as an ideological society below the surface just doesn't believe it anymore.
Well, first of all, that is still the case in Russia. So the Great Patriotic War is still a major center point and kind of pivot for national identity and national political consciousness in Russia, right? And a lot of people that support Putin will think in those terms. It isn't quite the same because, of course, 45 to 89 is what is 44 years, 45 years. This war finished in 88, so it's 38 years ago. It's a bit shorter, but it's a really important point. I would say that makes what's happening now even more relevant. Why am I saying that? My personal view is, and people might disagree, had the Iran-Iraq war not happened, I don't think the Islamic Republic would have endured as it has done. Without that founding myth, confirming the worldview of martyrdom, right? Without that founding myth, I think after Khomeini, sorry, I've been saying Khamenei so much. After Khomeini, after he dies, I think they would have had a transitional problem. And I think they probably would have become a more pro-West. I don't mean pro-West like Reza Pahlavi, but broadly a bit more pro-West, broadly a bit more pro-market, a bit more quote-unquote normal, right? I think some of the ideological edges would be blunted a bit more quickly. That war and that loss of people generalized that culture of martyrdom. Right, and it's really important to say that the Islamic Revolution was really popular. There was a referendum. It was pretty fair. It was voted in for. People really supported it. And then you have this horrible thing, 80 to 88.
It was like 97% in favour, wasn't it? It was
crazy. I mean,
but does that mean it was fair, or does that mean?
Well, many people say it. No, but many people say it was genuinely. There's no need to. I don't know, but basically the people that didn't agree with it had left the country. They didn't even bloody campaign. They were so terrified. So nobody's going to say it's like, indie ref in this country in 2014. But there was mass consent for it among the people in the country. Anyway, without that, my view is the country as it was wouldn't have endured as a revolutionary state like the one we see today. And of course, Saddam is encouraged to invade by the Americans. I think arguably, one can make this argument, they're doing the same thing now. So you would say without the Iran-Iraq war, the Islamic Republic wouldn't have lasted a couple of decades, probably would have burned out a little bit or reformed, would have had some kind of Deng figure. I think that's probably true. Same mistake today. Arguably, right? If there's some kind of conflict and they kill 50, 60, 70,000 Iranians, they flatten Tehran, I just think it's a reconfirmation of that worldview. And I think it is in miniature, a similar event to the Iran-Iraq war. So it is an ideological society. You're right, these things can be overstated. I think it's a little bit different to communism. Branko Milanovic has a great sort of argument around this stuff. He just says that communism made people really lazy. In Yugoslavia, he says at the end in Yugoslavia, they had a really nice life and they were working 3 or 4 days a week. And ultimately, market societies have this fantastic mechanism of disciplining people, making them work, driving innovation. So socialism achieved what it wanted to do, but it also failed. Really, really interesting hypothesis. Anyway, this is different because in many ways, the Soviet Union was a victim of its own success, right? The Islamic Republic a little bit different. But I do think it's, to return to this story in that clip, that crazy clip, Michael, I do think it's a very different kind of regime type to Venezuela.
We got one more clip from that press conference. The whole thing was incredible. This is when Trump is asked whether the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, so that's the exiled son of the former Shah, could take over Iran. This was his answer.
I guess he is. Some people like him, and we haven't been thinking about too much about that. It would seem to me that somebody from within maybe would be more appropriate. I've said that. He looks like a very nice person. But it would seem to me that somebody that's there, that's currently popular, if there's such a person. But we have people like that. We have people that were more moderate. These were radical lunatics. And you know what they get? They get nothing. All they do is kill people.
Sorry, but that's the same press conference where he said, oh, yeah, there were some people from within the regime who we thought could maybe take over, but we killed them. And then there were some others, but then we killed them again. And now there's a few, but we're probably going to kill them as well. So there's some internal inconsistency. I suppose what struck me is just how he thinks this is Venezuela, because that word for word could have been him talking about Maria Corina Machado.
Yeah.
Where there were originally all these Venezuelan exiles who were saying, oh, Trump, please go invade Venezuela and then we'll put our hero Machado in power. And in Iran, there's all these exiles saying, please invade Iran and put our hero Pahlavi in power. Then Trump does it, invades him and says, oh, I'm not going to put your guy in power. I mean, they're not going to be able to control it. They've got no roots in the country. But it's word for word exactly the same. Now, if you're a Pahlavist, just as if you're a fan of Machado, you'd be a bit pissed off. This war was done on false pretenses in many cases. I mean, there's many ways in which in Venezuela it did work for him to some degree. It's probably
100% it worked.
It's probably not going to work in Iran.
No, but also you're saying that Pahlavists will be pissed off. Well, they won't be, because they've constructed a completely alternative reality. They get their news from Iran International. I think the Iranian diaspora in the United States right now is probably like the most supportive, base of Trump voters. It just is. So they've constructed a completely artificial reality. It's like a cult, right? And I think that will take a very long time to snap out of. But also, Michael, I'll be brief. Who would want the job of being the top dog in Iran? Let's say you're Ali Daei, a former football superstar, European footballer, played for Bayern Munich, Hertha Berlin. He's loved by Iranians. You can imagine him as a sort of, the equivalent of like Klitschko in Ukraine. Above politics, brings the country together. Why would he want the job? What, the Israelis, they're just going to bomb his house one day, kill his daughter, kill his granddaughter, kill his brother, his mother? Like, no thank you. I'd rather just be like a national treasure. And the costs now of being in frontline politics in Iran are obviously very, very high. Everybody's trying to shoot you. Both sides, by the way. Both sides. And the reason why Pahlavi's not in the country, Reza Pahlavi's not even in Doha, right? He's not even in Riyadh. He's nowhere near this because he knows that people will try and kill him. So how on earth is he going to run the country? The only way they can do that is that if they literally kill hundreds of thousands of people. And of course, that just creates more grief. Relatives, friends, etc. Right? Every person who dies is a recruiting sergeant for the other side. This whole story is just built on nonsense and incoherence and contradiction. But it's happening. It is happening because ultimately America has this awesome capacity for military violence, and it's willing to use it under Trump.
So obviously Trump is completely incoherent. There's just one more clip on this I wanted to show where there was an account given that was coherent, I think. So this is Yalda Hakim from Sky. She gave she relayed a conversation she'd had with a member of the Israeli security establishment.
They expect to basically do it that way for the foreseeable future. I just wanted to share a conversation I was having with someone from the Israeli security establishment. And they described it as this scenario not being regime change. They don't believe, and even before the strikes were launched on Saturday, they said regime change was just not something that they thought was possible. Unless there is a major surprise over the course of the next few weeks, there will be no regime change in Iran. They described it, in a way that we've heard about other places that Israel has targeted, mowing the lawn. So smashing everything for a few weeks, going away, and then perhaps coming back in 6 months, 9 months, just as we've seen. I mean, the 12-day war was 8 months ago, just as we saw then. And then when, the Iranians basically re-emerged and regrouped and re-established themselves, they've come back to mow the lawn again. And they expect to basically do it that way for the foreseeable future.
I mean, that was very depressing, but it sounded plausible to me. If you're looking at what are they hoping, because obviously, one thing Israel could go for is state failure and state collapse, which I think they don't mind. I think they're up for that. But there are some risks with that. You get a lot of instability. Whereas it might be that they get the best of both worlds with this mow the lawn strategy, which is, I suppose, what they did with Gaza. Right?
Yeah.
They didn't try and overthrow Hamas. They actually were quite happy for Hamas to be there and to, I suppose, to in some respects delegitimize the Palestinian cause. And what they would do is just every now and again they'd just do some carpet bombing and say, well, that will take them back a few years in terms of development. And I suppose Israel are trying to normalize a new world where they can do that beyond the borders of Palestine, right? Just loads of different countries in the Middle East.
Well, they do anywhere, right? South Lebanon.
If they're getting a bit too big for their boots, we'll just bomb them for a while.
Mowing the lawn. I mean, it's an incredible way of talking about human beings, isn't it? Of course, Iran, 93 million people, reasonably sophisticated technological base. It wouldn't be easy, but you would absolutely try and develop nuclear weapons, wouldn't you? Of course you would. I can't think of a set of conditions where it would be more rational to develop nuclear weapons as quickly as you can. Of course, getting them to Israel, that would be hard. Some kind of dirty bomb. And people might be saying, oh my God, who's projecting fantasies of a dirty bomb in Tel Aviv? I'm not. I'm just saying, if that's what Israel pursues and achieves, it's a very rational thing to do. This is, again, to use words that we shouldn't really use as political journalists, it's evil. What you're basically saying is we're going to create a failed state. We're going to create Afghanistan. To repeat, it's sitting on the world's second largest reserves of gas. It's a very strategic part of the world in terms of its location. Refugees will come to Europe, we'll have energy price spikes, but Israel doesn't care. It will kill all these people, it will make their lives miserable, and it will be funded by America. Of course, that won't go on forever because it's losing support from the American public, but for the foreseeable, right, for the next 5 years, certainly for the rest of the Trump administration, it will carry on. And I think this is where there has to be now a response from Europeans. You cannot have the Labour Party, at Labour conference with Labour Friends of Israel saying, well, we support Israel, but we don't support Netanyahu. It is a force for complete chaos in the world, complete chaos in the region. Yesterday, Gaza, today, Iran, tomorrow, Turkey. Israeli politicians are being very clear about that. I actually look at this and I think they kind of want to create ballpark 200 million refugees, and Nigel Farage is cheering it on. That won't be able to endure. I think it's too much of a contradiction. People are picking up on it too much. You've got somebody like Rupert Lowe, politically entrepreneurial, spying an opportunity. If you want to stop the boats, you've got to stop the wars. True, by the way. And he's saying we shouldn't be making more Iranian refugees, and I won't accept any. Now, I know lots of our audience won't like the accepting any bit, but the causality at least is a little bit more coherent than what Farage and the rest of the right has been saying basically my entire life. So, it sounds big and clever, but I think the costs of it are really, really high. And I I try to be moderate and pragmatic. But we have to now think about a world where the rest of the world literally can't afford to have Israel, right? It's not about Gaza, Palestine, or Iran. If they're just trying to create infinity failed states and create tens, hundreds of millions of displaced people in Turkey, Iran, some say even Pakistan, Syria, the world, the global community, in particular Europe, literally cannot afford that. Politically, economically, we literally cannot afford that. You know, Israel is a luxury, what do they like to call it?
Well, luxury belief.
It's a luxury belief. If you think, oh no, Israel should just be able to create, infinity refugees and infinity global instability. Europe and stable, reasonable political life in Europe cannot afford that. It's a luxury belief.
I like Zionism as a luxury belief for North Americans. Because the whole point of it, if you're not aware of this idea, a luxury belief, it's an idea mainly from the right, where it's saying middle-class people support things like abolish the police, because when the police are actually defunded, it doesn't affect the middle-class people, it affects people in working-class communities who don't actually support these, outlandish policies. It's not normally used on the left, but I think that is I think Zionism as a luxury belief for North Americans makes a lot of sense. There's a comment from Abixia, can't keep mowing the lawn if they shut down the oil trade, which I think is, I suppose, that is Iran's strategy in a nutshell, which is to say, we are going to make the cost of doing this as high as possible so that, you can't do it as often. Because obviously the Palestinians in Gaza weren't able to impose that big a cost when it came to mowing the lawn, especially not on the global economy. Whereas Iran, by sort of hitting out at any US or Israeli ally in the neighborhood, they are significantly raising the cost of this. So, as you say, Aaron, hopefully it will be the Europeans who sort of push back and say, or the Chinese or the Asians, saying, we don't want our oil prices and our gas prices to go up so that you can have your luxury project of expanded borders.
You've got Deng Xiaoping saying in bourgeoisie, enrich yourselves. It is glorious to get rich. That's what Deng famously said. Now, I'm on the left. I'm not meant to be saying that. But that is generally where politics is meant to, has kind of, that's what people claim to be pursuing on the centre-right in European politics. This is foreclosing that possibility permanently for Western Europe. Tucker Carlson said this yesterday, right? He said the big losers in all this are Western Europe. And you've got the Western European right cheering it on. I don't think that can last forever. And I'll say one more thing, Michael. Forever in a day, people like you and me, you have Zionists saying, well, don't you think Israelis have a right to a state of their own? Don't Jews have a right to a state in that part of the world? Don't Iranians have a right to a state? Don't Iranians have a right to a functioning state which can feed them and provide water and access to certain public goods like the rule of law? Don't Iranians have that right? Don't Lebanese have that right? Don't Syrians have that right? Don't Turks have that right? They're next, as I've said. Don't Pakistanis have that right? They would go for them already if they didn't have nukes. Don't these other countries have that right? Or is it just Israel? So I think in a way, Israel is completely discrediting the already stupid arguments which have been made to defend it. And I think Zionism, I don't know. Zionism on the one hand has never been stronger because it's propped up by this extraordinary military force with the Trump White House, obviously. But the political support and the kind of the logical arguments which have underpinned it for a very long time, for 80 years, they're kind of evaporating. This will be the third year in a row, I think, where Israel will see net emigration. That is significant. It's only it's tiny, but this is a settler state. And I don't say that, as a glib thing. It's literally a settler state. If you're a settler state and people are leaving, that's probably not good. And I do think there's a contradiction here, Michael, between Netanyahu, who's 76, wants to create a legacy for himself when he's gone. I'm the man that got rid of Khamenei and Assad and expanded Israel's borders, et cetera, et cetera. That might be in his interest, second only to Ben Gurion and the history of the Israeli state. Is it in the actual long-term strategic interest of Israel? I'm not so sure anymore.